Let's be honest, we are living in a golden age of bourbon. Every year, distilleries are pushing the limits of age, flavor, and rarity. But the last few years, they've given us some absolutely legendary bottles that people are going to talk about for decades. Today, I'm breaking down the top 5 best bourbons released since the start of the decade, now that we are halfway through the decade. These are the 5 bottles that, if you got your hands on them, you'll be telling your grandkids about them whether they want to hear it or not. Real quick before we dive in, if you love bourbon content, rare release, breakdowns, reviews, and stories from whiskey history, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep bringing you bigger and better videos every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Alright, let's pour into the list. When we're talking about bourbon history, Old Forester has to come up. Back in 1870, George Garvin Brown started bottling whiskey in sealed glass bottles, something unheard of at the time. That decision was all about guaranteeing quality and protecting customers from the adulterated whiskey that was all too common in the late 1800s. Fast forward 150 years later, and in 2020, Old Forester decided to celebrate their incredible anniversary with a truly special release, the Old Forester 150th Anniversary Bourbon. This release was made up of 150 barrels that were filled back in 2005, meaning the whiskey inside was around 14 years old. Those barrels came from Warehouse J and were grouped into 3 distinct batches to showcase different flavor profiles. Batch 1 leaned heavily into spice and oak. Batch 3 was bold, rich, and dark, but Batch 2, bottled at 126.4 proof, has become the fan favorite as well as my personal favorite. It hit that sweet spot of balance, complexity, richness, and drinkability all at once. Flavors of chocolate, roasted nuts, baking spice, and that classic Old Forester banana bread note made it unforgettable. I still think that Batch 2 is the best modern Old Forester release, period. It originally hit shelves at $150 MSRP, but today you'll pay anywhere from $350 to $400 on the secondary market, and honestly, some collectors won't even open their bottles. This release wasn't just whiskey, it was a celebration of a brand's 150-year legacy, and Old Forester nailed it. Next up, a bottle that proves wheated bourbon can be every bit as rich and complex as the boldest high rise. We're talking about the Old Fitzgerald very, very special 13-year from the Decanter series. Old Fitzgerald has been a wheated bourbon icon for generations. It became especially famous when Julian Pappy Van Winkle acquired the brand in the 1930s. Today it's produced at Heaven Hill, who honors that history with the stunning decanter-style bottled in bond releases. The 3-year-old VVS release stood out not only because of its gorgeous presentation, but because it's some of the first Bernheim distillate Heaven Hill distilled back in 1999. The barrels were dumped at 13 years old and tanked for about 10 years and held for the very special occasion of it being 25 years since Heaven Hill purchased the Old Fitzgerald brand. MSRP was around $250, which is an absolute steal for a wheated bourbon of this caliber. On secondary, you're looking at least $1,000, sometimes more depending on current demand. For many collectors, the 13-year was the pinnacle of the decanter line so far, capturing everything people love about wheated bourbon in one bottle, including a fantastic dusty note. I think this was a one-of-a-kind modern dusty that we absolutely won't see ever again. If there's one distillery that constantly balances tradition with innovation, it's Wild Turkey. And in recent years, Russell's Reserve has been at the center of that, giving bourbon lovers age-stated whiskey that competes with anything on the market. In 2024, Wild Turkey dropped the Russell's Reserve 15-year, and it instantly became one of the hottest releases of the year, in my opinion, the decade. This bourbon comes from the rick houses that Eddie Russell himself selected, showcasing Wild Turkey at a mature, refined level. At 117.2 proof, it packs a punch but keeps balance beautifully. The flavor? Think rich vanilla, toffee, baking spice, cherry cola, and deep oak, with that signature wild turkey earthiness that makes it stand apart. The 15 sits in an interesting place compared to other Russell's releases. It's older and bolder than the beloved Russell's 13 year. It bridges the gap towards some of the oldest turkey releases we've seen in decades. I will say that anytime I have tasted Russell's 15, it almost doesn't taste like wild turkey because there isn't much of the clove spice. It's mostly just rich oak, vanilla, cherry, and viscosity. MSRP was around $250 and was actually worth the steep price Wild Turkey always charges for their limited editions. The question is, will we ever see another batch of Russell's 15, and will it be the same quality as the first batch? Now, let's talk about one of the most legendary names in bourbon, George T. Stagg from the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. In 2021, for the first time ever, Buffalo Trace announced there would be no Stagg release. The barrels just didn't meet the quality standard they wanted. That only made anticipation for the 2022 release skyrocket, and when it finally hit, it was worth the wait. The 2022 George T. Stagg came in at a fiery 138.7 proof and carried a bold 15 years and 5 months age statement. This was Stagg at its best: dark chocolate, espresso, dried cherry, oak, leather, and that huge blast of caramelized sugar. It reminded people exactly why Stagg has its cult following, and in my opinion is still the best George T that has been released so far this decade. Retail price was around $100, but of course, nobody actually found it at that price unless they got incredibly lucky. On secondary, bottles were going for around $800, sometimes more. So the 2022 release wasn't just about the whiskey, it was about Buffalo Trace proving that when they do decide to release Stagg, they're going to make it worth the hype. And finally, we get to number one, a bourbon that lives up to its name, King of Kentucky. Originally introduced back in 1881, King of Kentucky was revived by Brown-Forman in 2018 as an ultra-limited Kentucky-only release. Since then, it has become the stuff of legend. Here's what makes it special. Each year, only about 1,000 to 2,000 bottles are released, often as single barrels, always at cask strength. Proof varies from barrel to barrel, but it usually lands somewhere between 125 and 140 proof. The flavor is nothing short of elite. Think dark fruit, leather, tobacco, rich caramel, and waves of oak. It's intense, complex, and unforgettable. MSRP sits around $250, but good luck finding it there. On secondary, King of Kentucky easily fetches $1,500 plus, depending on the release year and barrel. What makes King of Kentucky so special is the combination of rarity, history, and sheer quality. Each release feels like a once-in-a-lifetime pour, and for many bourbon enthusiasts, it represents the pinnacle of what Kentucky bourbon can be, and in my opinion, could not be any better than what it is. Before we wrap up, I've got to give an honorable mention to a bottle that completely shifted how people look at Maker's Mark, which is the annual Cellar Aged release, particularly like 2023 release. Maker's has always been known for consistency, one recipe, one product, bottled at 90 proof. But with this release, they showed they could innovate and compete in the premium bourbon space. The process is fascinating. Maker's built a limestone cellar on their property that stays at about 50 degrees year-round. Barrels for cellar age spend about 6 years in the standard warehouses, then were moved into the cellar for slower maturation. The final blend combined 11 and 12-year-old bourbon bottled at 115.7 proof. The flavor, deep and complex, dark fruit, honey, cocoa, leather, and that soft wheat sweetness. Makers is known for, but dialed up with way more depth. I'm glad Maker's Mark came out with this, as it is what I think many fans wanted. Even though it may not be one of the most chased limited editions every year, I still think they are fantastic and worth mentioning on the list. So there you have it, the best bourbons released this decade. Old Forester 150th Anniversary Batch 2, Old Fitzgerald VVS 13-year, Russell's Reserve 15, George T. Stagg 2022, and the legendary King of Kentucky. Plus the Maker's Mark Cellar Aged 2023 as an honorable mention that proves even the most consistent brands can surprise us. These bottles aren't just whiskey, they're history, they're innovation, and they show how far bourbon has come in just the last decade. What do you think? Which one of these would you put at number 1, and what bottle do you think deserves to be added to the list? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future bourbon breakdowns. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next pour.